Today we're talking to Gina Ablett of the Crafty Carer, who is a full-time caregiver for her grandma Betty, who lives with dementia. I don't know if you know my name, but my name's Gina, and I've been caring for my grandmother, who is 91, for the last just over 2.5 years. I have another grandmother that we care for at home as well, but my mum's her primary. And I go see her on the 4 hours off that I get a week from here, and help with certain things that she needs help with as well. Um, Betty, who I look after and live with, I'm here from about 3 or 4 o'clock on a Sunday, and I go home about 5 o'clock on a Friday. And it's day and night care for her. So when I leave, we use a mixture of professional caregivers and my parents. It's my dad's mum that I look after. So my parents come and fill in the blanks as they need to. Um, and Betty has an unofficial diagnosis of dementia. So
Right.
we were due to start the process when we was noticing things that were not quite right. Um, about 4 years ago. Um, but she got sick and she just kind of declined, ended up in hospital after an accident. And when she came out, it was very clear from what they were saying that there was some impairment. And we just went straight into caregiving to some extent. Um, and what we kind of entered that stage during COVID. So we didn't really know what to expect, and obviously very scared about bringing people in. My parents managed from March till June, and it was very clear as she was declining quite quickly at that point that they were going to need more help. And that's when I left my job of 3 years at the time, and moved in. So I have a very supportive husband who um, agreed for me to do that. Um, and yeah, we just make it work. Yeah, I mean, you have such a, setup and is making it work, but how did you set up and is making it work, but how did you guys decide on between you and your husband and your parents? How did you decide on this, arrangement where you were living with your grandma part of the week and home for a
Yeah.
couple days, all of it? It was almost quite simple. Um, we don't have children with no intent to have them, so we weren't putting anything on hold. I was very career focused, but he's very supportive of what I do. And at the time, I was unhappy with work. And I've always been really involved with the nuns, and I kept worrying about how my parents were coping. And I'd said to him, if I leave work, we were in the pandemic. Although I was in a career, it was in hospitality. So, nightmare. And I just said to him, it would be no different than times where I've worked away. When I first started, I had only committed to Monday to Friday. So I was like, it's just like me working away at one of the other hotels, Monday to Friday, and I'll be home on the weekends. But we were honest with each other and we said that, realistically, there's no end date to this. Um, let's relook at this in 5 years and see what's going on. Um, we obviously we look at it a lot quicker than that now. We touch base on a regular basis, but I said to him, I don't want you to think like this is just going to be for the pandemic or it's just going to be for 6 months. She was really sick at the time, so I don't think any of us thought we would be doing it as long as we are now. And now I look at it and I think it could be another 10. Like it so we were very honest and he understood. We've made some changes to our schedule. He's here a lot more with some changes in Nan's dementia. He's able to do that. And their relationship has changed since her dementia has transitioned. So it's easier for him to be here. The conversation with my dad was very different. They didn't want me to be Nan's caregiver. They didn't want it to be my responsibility. But they knew her wishes were to stay at home and they were struggling to maintain that. Um, it was okay for a while when it was just kind of popping in every few hours between them and caregivers, but she kept having a lot of falls. And we realized with her dementia, her risk management had just gone. So there was a lot of incidences in a short period of time where she just kept putting herself at risk. Um, and she ended up back in hospital during that time with an injury. And I said to my dad, I'm really unhappy with work. I remember ringing him in tears saying, I'm so miserable. I don't know what to do. I want to leave my job. And I've always been told, like, don't leave a job till you have another one. But we're in the pandemic. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And he said, just leave. We'll help you figure out whatever the next stage is. And I talked to him before about looking after Nan, but he'd always said, you've worked so hard for your career. I don't want you to step back at this point. And then the next day after we had that conversation, I rang him and said, now I've resigned. Can we talk about me helping with Nan? And me and Will had already had the conversation. And I said to him, Will's on board with what this will be. This is what I'm willing to do. I'll come on a Monday morning and I'll leave on a Friday night. And then you and mum and the carers can fill in the weekends. And that worked for about 4 months. And although I was here during the week on a night time and could see things were changing, on a weekend, she just had a little bit of care at night time, just checking in on her. We had another fall at night time, ended up back in hospital with an injury. And when my dad rung me, I said, we need to go to 24/7. So I'd had another conversation with my husband and I said, I want to offer to come back on a Sunday to take another night and an afternoon. He was like, okay. And I said, but that will be my line. Now we will always be able to have at least Saturday of our life. So I went back to my parents and I said that, and they were like, as long as you're okay with it. Again, the guilt of parenting and everything, they were reluctant, but I'm quite persuasive. So they let me do it. Um, and they started covering the nights from that point. So they were doing Friday and Saturday night when I wasn't here. Um, and it just started to get too much last year after about a year and a half in. Because we have my other nan, my dad had his own business. It's demanding. And at the time, she was still getting up through the night. So, my dad had finished work. They'd come straight around here so I could leave. And then they put her to bed, but they're not sleeping. And then my dad has to go back to work on a Monday. It was just becoming impractical. And I spoke to my social worker and I said, we need to look at getting some more aid, because I didn't want her to have to go into a care home because of those 2 nights, but I'd kind of drawn that line for myself. I wouldn't take on anymore. And it's very hard for me to not just be here all the time, but it's the agreement we had. And it works when it works. When everyone's coping, it works. So, yeah, it was interesting conversations all the way through. We tried to be honest with each other about, if they're coping, if I'm coping, if my husband's coping, and we try and make changes and support each other as and when we can. Um, I do take on, through my own choice, a lot of everything. Um, but I'm in a better place than everybody else is with it. So it doesn't affect me anymore in the same way. Um, and I have 3 sisters, but we didn't really talk to them about it. We just okay, Gina's moving in. This is what's going to happen. They all have kids and families and things. So it was never really going to be a practical thing to ask them for any kind of help with what she physically needed somebody here for. Um, and scheduling that would have been an absolute nightmare. So, so yeah, we didn't really discuss it with them. We just kind of said, this is happening. I hope you're all okay with it. And they were like, well, it's your life, do if that's what you want to do. So
Yeah,
they
I mean,
options, yeah.
yeah, it sounds like you guys have been really like honest with each other through all of this, even through hard conversations or like boundary setting. It sounds like your family's very communicative. Um,
Yeah, I think at times we probably don't feel like we are, but I think compared to a lot of people that I speak to, I'm like, yeah, we do talk a lot and we are physically in a distance to each other where I can ring and go, I need help, and sure, somebody will come running. Um, Happened a lot more in the first year. Now I'm like, I don't need anybody. I'm fine.
I got this. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it sounds like you wanted to care for your grandma. Can you talk a little bit about what's been like the most challenging in the past few years and what's been the most rewarding of caring for her,
Yeah.
nearly full time?
Unbeknownst to my parents, probably about 3 years before this all happened, both my grandmothers, within the same week, said, um, "You were either put us in a care home, right?" And I don't know if they'd seen something on the TV or whatever prompted them. And I made them a promise to try. I said, I don't know where my life is going to be. I didn't live here all the time. I'd lived in the US, I'd lived down in London. So I didn't know where my life was going to be when they asked me this question. And I said, all I can say is I'll try my best. And then when we decided to do this, I kept that in mind. And me and my mum came up with these three rules. To do this, we would make sure we could always keep them happy, healthy, and safe. And if we couldn't do all of those three, we would have to make a decision against their request, but in their best interest. So when I started this, I think like any caregiver that chooses to do it, a lot of people just get thrown into the circumstance and they just have to find their feet. I did choose to move into this. I came in with this idea that it was going to be hard, but the things I thought were going to be hard, I found easy. And the things I thought would be easier, I found hard. To start with, once I got processes in place of how to help her with certain things and not beat myself up about making mistakes and doing things that didn't work out right, the hardest thing obviously really was letting go of our relationship as granddaughter and grandmother. She knows me by name and she recognizes me by face, but she doesn't acknowledge that relationship and we don't bring it up in conversation anymore. And we've had to progress that in conversation when mum and dad are here. I am trying, although after 37 years of being alive, it's hard not to call them mum and dad, but I try to acknowledge them as Sue and Paul to her. Those are the hardest things to really get your mind around, with everything else that comes with caregiving and dementia in particular. They can change, but you're wanting to stay the same with them. And when you can let go of that, as I have, it's just not painful. Whereas when you're trying to fight for that recognition, for that acknowledgement, for that moment of her knowing who I am, the only person that would benefit from that at that point is me, and the only people I'm hurting by fighting for that acknowledgement was both of us. So I let that go about a year ago, and then it just all became a lot easier. And I am in a very good mental place with my caregiving. Both my nans are in very different stages. Babs is bedbound, palliative care, non-vocal, about 95% of the time. Um, but I have the best visits with her because I'm just in a place where I can see past their illness and I see them and I try and make their moment with me as joyful as possible. And it's become a mission of mine to, especially with Babs, if she was to go tonight, I would be very sad, but I would also be grateful that her suffering is over. But if she's here tomorrow and I get to see her, I want that to be the best half an hour of her day. So those are the best things for me now is just creating those moments, you know, before it used to be like a win if I figured out how to dress her without, sweating and crying and us both falling over. Now I'm just grateful to just have them laugh and acknowledge that in the ways that they can, and just know that today was a little bit better because we did something fun or interesting or meaningful. So yeah, those for me are the best things of being a caregiver when you can have those moments.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I think what you just said is, like, so encouraging, especially people that are early in their caregiving journey who are like, "This is impossible. I can't get dressed without crying and screaming and falling over." To hear this transition for you to it being, like, a really joyful experience, um, I think is very encouraging to people, especially who are early in their caregiving journey.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
I
think,
know
sorry,
no, go ahead.
that's what I try and share on my posts now on Instagram because I just, I was that person that was in the dark, the crying, the shouting, the swearing, the, oh my God, what am I doing? I can't do this. You know, she hates me. All of those emotions, I hate her, she doesn't love me, all of those feelings, every human person that ever has cared for somebody that they loved before or was just in a relationship with in some way before goes through. And I still get some of those feelings. They're not as intense most of the time, but I'm able to let them go quicker. I give myself grace to feel them, but I don't hold on to them because it just doesn't benefit anybody in my life, including myself. And I've always said from the very beginning that caregiving is hard, but it's like it's 90% mindset. If you can get your brain around a process, that's a win. If you can get your brain around an emotion, that's a win. If you can get your brain around who they are becoming and who they are right now, that's a win. And each time you do that, it just becomes easier.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. You started to mention your Instagram account also. I know the Crafty Carer has, like, been born out of your caregiving experience. Can you just tell us more about the Crafty Carer?
Yeah. So my eldest sister has her own business and she's on Instagram. And back not last year, the year before in September, I got COVID. And I was here when I got tested positive and I got isolated with Nam for 17 days on my own. My dad would come to the window every day and I'm masked up and I'm terrified she's going to get it. And I was so tired and obviously not feeling great. And I decided I needed to do something to just keep myself awake to start with. So I started cutting up clothes and I made some fabric flowers and then I made them into brooches and then I sold them for a charity fundraiser that I did for Dementia UK. And it just kind of sparked from a very dark, hard time that I could still do something positive. And I was proud of myself that I raised some money for charity and it just spurred me on to keep going. So although I get bored of doing the same kind of crafts all the time, there was this baseline where people had donated clothes to me so I could just cut them up and make things out of them. And then my first November that I hit, I made some fabric wreaths for this Christmas season. And my sister who has her own business is like, that's your business. Like they're gonna sell. You need to make some money to to refund your crafting, if nothing else, set up an Instagram page. And I'm like, "Ugh, I I'm not great on Facebook. I don't know if I really want to do that. I don't know how it works." And she literally took my phone off me, set up the account, made up the name, and said, "Okay, go." And I was like, every day, like, people are sending, I don't know what to do. Like, how do you do it? And she was so supportive. And I was grateful that she was trying to focus me and give me a bit of me back and a bit of identity of not just being Nan's caregiver. But I was struggling with this whole look at me, look at my crafts, please will you buy them? And I'm a really good salesperson. I've worked in hospitality for like my whole entire life. I can sell anything for anyone, but selling yourself is a different ball game. And my cousin said to me, there's two names to your page. Just share your story. Share your story, share your crafts, donate some money, see where it goes. And that's what I did. And it was very nerve wracking for me. I'm very honest on my page. I hate videos of myself. I hate my voice on recordings, but I wanted other people like me to not feel like I did at the beginning and to see that they're not the only ones feeling those feelings, share resources where we could, and just create a community of people that I don't see here, and it was created in lockdown. So I wasn't seeing other caregivers and other than my mom, but we're very different caregivers and we're different people and we're in different mindsets and we're related. So my caregiving community kind of started through Carrie on Dementia Darling. I saw her page and I loved her Sunday stories. And I used to send something in every week. And people would then connect with me and reach out and say, I saw your story. And it, I was never about numbers. It was always about connecting and community. And I have this community with crafting, I have a community with caregiving, and then I also have where it crosses over. And I have fellow caregivers who have businesses, and I have people that were customers that have, you know, this happened last year when it was National Alzheimer's Day, and I posted, shout, advocate, National Alzheimer's Day, let's talk about it. And a customer messaged me and said a week later and said, I just got back on Instagram. Um, my dad got diagnosed on Alzheimer's Day for dementia. What do I do? And I was like, this is why I do my page, because I wasn't there. She may have seen somebody else, but at the time she saw me and she reached out, we've stayed connected, and my page has become so much like I often get to just post about my crafts. I have great supporters, and a lot of them are caregivers. Um, but I balance my time between creating for myself, and those are the things I usually sell. And now, because I'm in a stage with Betty where she's joining in on certain things, that I spend a lot more time on activities with her. Um, so yes, just trying to get that balance between what she needs, what I need, and sometimes just making an extra £10 so I can buy some more paints. That's always great.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, like, you just shared that it was, like, hard to get on Instagram, and I very much identify with the, weirdness of, like, selling yourself, but I'm glad that I think it was your sister or friend who said, like, "You have 2 pieces here, and you've really made your page, like, the social part of social media, and you've been able to make an extra £10 to buy paints and, you've grown a substantial following, but, like, you're really focused on the heart of it, which is, like, building a community for other caregivers."
Yeah, and I really do use it for that. I mean, just strangely, a lot of my caregivers, I have a few that are in the UK, but a lot of them are in the US.
Mhm.
So when I start my day, they're going to bed, and I message them all around 3 o'clock. So I know they're all kind of getting out of bed, and I try and start their day a bit positive. And then when I wake up in the morning, they'll send me a message when they're going to bed. So it has generally become like a family to me that I can be completely honest with. And I think until you're a caregiver, you just don't know. It's like a lot of things. Until you walk in those shoes of that thing, you can research, you can be sympathetic, you can be all of those things, but realistically, you just don't know what it's like to live with somebody 24 hours a day that is a bit mental. Like, you know, and I love Nan, but she keeps me on my toes. And until you're here for a long duration of time with her, she's really good at hiding certain things. And you have to be with her 24 hours a day to really get to understand what the illness is and who she is now and the difficulties that come with that. And my fellow caregivers just know, all I have to say is like, this happened. And I'm like, oh, I totally get it. So it's, it's really been a savior for me. I think it's helped me get to where I am. I really do think without it, I would have really struggled because I got into such a dark place where other people's happy comments, I was like, my life's not like that. I think now, like, I must irritate people so much if they watch me, if they're having a bad day, because I'm like, get some paints out. A year ago, I'm like, get some paints out. She can't be on fork. Like, what's going on? So I, I, because I've been that person, I'm very conscious of who I'm becoming. I'm becoming that annoying, positive person. But I hope it just gives people literally that hope because I made through that dark, horrible cloud that, we often hit. And, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow with Nan, and her dementia might change again. And I'm going to have to reset this mindset and work through those difficulties. And each time I hit a new road with her, it takes me a little bit less to get to this point, you know, before it'd be a year and then it'd be 6 months. And now I'm just like, okay, give me a week. We're just going to figure out whatever the new process needs to be and we'll move on. Um, but that's time and experience. That was not me 2 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, the rebound is getting quicker, but definitely takes a learning period.
Yeah.
We the Givers is the our company is focused on helping reduce the financial burden and financial stress on caregivers. And that's why this podcast exists is little bit to do the same as what you've done is like make a space for people to hear about and share their stories around a topic that is like often taboo. Like we don't like to talk about our money and what we spend our money on and where our money is coming from. But I think especially for people like early in their caregiving journey, this question of like, how do you afford that? How do I afford this piece of the care? Do I need a bigger house? Whatever. All these questions are very unknown. And so that's sort of what we're focused on here. So I guess just to start as we pivot into talking about money and finances, your caregiving experience has been ever changing as Nan has different needs week over week. But maybe just to start, like at large, what has the financial piece of caregiving been like for you?
Well, for me personally, the biggest thing is that I gave up a career. So we went from a two salary household, and I love my husband, but I was the breadwinner slightly and had been for a long time to me just going, well, that's gone. And because of how we do our setup, I still have my house, I still have my bills, nothing changes. We just have one less amount of money coming into the house. So obviously, our social life is very restricted, and we've had to tailor make our spend to suit that. But I've quickly realized that the support here in the UK is very different to the US. Um, I always think we have it easy, although we get frustrated. Like your healthcare system and your support system is absolutely insane. I don't know how American caregivers even navigate it. So people like you helping people try and figure out ways and share those resources are amazing. But my frustrations here, so we have the NHS. So if Nan has to go into hospital, it doesn't cost us money. Perfect. We don't have to worry about things like insurance and things like that for healthcare, which is great. When it comes to the social system where we start looking at care, there is a tier system. So if you have care at home, they take into account your finances that are in the bank and money that you have as money, but not the house. So as your money decreases, you get support with your care plan that you need at home. If that starts to become too high, like if I wasn't here with Betty, there's no way they would fund her 24 hours a day to stay at home. they would say they have to put her into a care home. They cannot financially support her. She's not fully funded, but they would still have a huge problem with it. Whereas as the money goes down, you have to pay less and they pay more. So that is a great thing. If they go into a care home, they then take into consideration the house and they'll make you sell the house to fund the care. My biggest problem, and I think it's just the way society is built, is my nan has been a widow for 37 years. Her and my granddad bought this house 54 years ago. It was the first one on the block, and they worked really hard to buy the house, to pay off the mortgage. My nan worked up until her retirement. You know, she maintained herself on her own. And the more she saved, the more she has to then spend in her social care. Whereas somebody who hasn't worked, that lives off payments from the government, they'll get the same care as my nan. And I really struggle with that reality because I know how hard she worked to try and put a little nest egg away, you know, and I've seen her live her life where she saved money. You know, she's never been rich, but she worked so hard. And I find it really frustrating that knowing that somebody that hasn't worked is going to get the same care. And yes, money does give you options of, you know, paying for a different company if you don't like the one that's provided, or um, going to a nicer care home if you don't like the ones that the government provide at their level. But the bottom line is the sale of a house will only cover care for so many months, and then they pay for it anyway. So that for me is how the system, I struggle with the system here for my nan. From my point of view, um, I am classed as I'm classed as a family unpaid caregiver, but I do get financial aid of like £60 a week. So if I did not have my husband, that would be nothing. And again, it's that cut off. So anybody who does 35 hours of care a week gets the same amount as me, and I do 35 hours in a day and a half. So that is where you start to get frustrated with the system because you're like, are you kidding me? Like they they don't support you to keep them out of the system. They make it too easy to say, just put them in a home. And that is a frustration for me because I just think, you know, they want to be at home. That's their wishes. Help us do that. Don't make it so hard and complicated. But that's not how the system works. And right
It
now,
seems
sorry,
it seems like it's more expensive for the government to do it that way. Like, isn't it more expensive for them to have someone in a facility than it would be to fairly compensate family
uh,
caregivers?
technically, for somebody like Babs, it's about on par because she gets set amount of time visits 4 times a day. She doesn't need 24-hour supervision. But somebody like Bessie that needs somebody with her the full time, it would become more expensive because you've got to pay somebody to be here 24 hours a day. So to put her in a care home, you're paying somebody to be in a care home. There's always somebody around. So it, it's dependent on their situation and their demands of what they need. And as the system is designed for as they get worse, you get more benefits. And again, that's very difficult because Babs in particular, and they've both been through this process, but Betty never passed it, which is why the system is social and health. So Babs has got more medical needs, so her funding comes out of health. So she's fully funded. Betty has less health needs, but needs more care because she's more physical and higher risk. but she only gets part funded. So it's because we're on both sides of it, it's very frustrating because to get onto healthcare, you have to go through like this 60 questionnaire interview with people that makes you relive every nightmare that every caregiver has. Can you put a 1 to 5 scale on how bad is their swallowing? How bad, how often do they fall? How much weight have they lost recently? And I understand there has to be a scale. But one of the things I try and do here, and I go and do talks at our local social services, because I get so frustrated, is I hate feeling like a tick box. I hate feeling like I know you need this information, but I am a human being and so is my nan. So have a conversation with me, know what you need to ask, but just ask it in a way that isn't so like, so, you know, can she swallow? Does she choke often? It just feels they make a very personal experience. It can feel very impersonal. Um, and it sadly all comes down to money because they just want to know where the money is coming out of and whose pot is going to get emptied fastest. So it is one of those things that people don't like to talk about, but it is something that does hugely impact your care, especially here, because if you don't understand the system, you just do as you're told, and then they might not be doing or getting the care that you want for them, and people don't know what to do. I know when we first started, we had a care provider and they were awful. And I'm like, this cannot be our only solution. And I remember saying to them, I'm going to deal with social services. This is ridiculous. And I would ring every single day and go, well, this has happened and this has happened and this has happened. And it just became worse and worse and worse. And I'm like, I want a different provider. And it was like, well, they're the primary. So primary means first. They are not the only company. And right now we're paying for our provider. So I want you to tell me who the other providers are and we want to change. And we did change. And we've been with the same company for both the NANs since then. And, touch wood, nothing's ever perfect, but it is a lot better than that was. But if you don't have somebody like me, a lot of people in the system don't have family caregivers. They're on their own. It's so scary to me that they will just get lost in a system that is about saving money or putting money in the right direction where it's not necessarily beneficial to the person. And that is very frustrating. And then the other thing that I found is that we have charities here. We have supportive networks for caregivers and people that need certain kind of resources, but they're a secret. Like I have been looking after Nam for 2.5 years. I only found out about a caregiver support group in November. And I have used them so much because they do a local a care support group. And it's not just about going and talking. They actually do practical support and different care groups and everything. I'm like, how did I not know about 2 years ago? Why did social services not say, do you know in your local area? Because I searched, but I just must have missed them. The other one is the incontinence charity. So here we can get some of incontinence products funded. Once they're incontinent to some level, you can get it funded. We didn't find out of that over a service that was a government run. My nan's neighbour told me. Did you know? She just happened to see me bring the shopping in. And she's like, why are you buying those? And I'm like, well, she needs them. And she's like, yeah, why are you buying them? You can get them for free. This is the number. This is what you need to do. Ring social services, tell them to refer you. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to speak to every single person that I know that is looking after a loved one. If they're in contact, you need to ring this number.
That's so wild too, because that's like the kind of cost that adds up. Like
Yeah.
buying a package is okay, whatever, but like you have to buy them all of the time. This is the small cost that's going to add up over time. And it's wild that you didn't learn about this for several years into the
Yeah.
caregiving experience. Yeah.
it's crazy that nobody, like, it should be part of my welcome pack. Like, you are a caregiver, and if you come across these issues, these are the charities in your local area that can help you. And it's I just find it so frustrating that that is not how it is, and it's almost like, well, the funding's not huge, so we'll just keep it a secret till you find us. And some of the charities you speak to, especially the care support charity that I have joined, they're like, we're trying to get out there more. We're trying to find people, but where do you go to find family caregivers? And I'm like, workplaces, hospitals, like those places where this all starts, and those, and they are trying to reach out and get people, but I'm like, why did my social services just not tell me about you? You should have been, Gina, if you need support, this is a really good resource. And, financially, they have services. I'm trying to go to an Alzheimer's and an expo down in London next week. And they it was too last minute, but they were trying to fund me to go, or at least partly fund me to go, because they knew that it was part of my caregiver growth, that they wanted to support something they know that I don't have the spare funds to do, and they just rang me today and said, do you do all of your, they said blogging, but do you do all of your stuff on your phone? And I said, yeah, my laptop broke a few months ago. I can't afford to get it replaced. And they said, well, we might have an iPad or a tablet that you can use. And I said, well, that would be great, because I nearly signed up for an online dementia course the other day, and they said you couldn't do it on your phone. It's too involved. So now I'll be able to sign up for that. But why didn't I know about these things 2 years ago? I think about all the support they've given me in such a short period of time. They have people that donate free massage. I've been for a Reiki appointment. I've had a free back massage. Things that caregivers will never justify spending the cost on. We all talk about self care, but actually physically, one, being able to afford it, two, be able to physically fit it into your time and have your loved one looked after. Just taking a couple of hours off to go for a massage is not just taking a couple of hours off and going for a massage. It's paying for a caregiver for a couple of hours. And then for me, it's taxes to get where I need to go. And then you're paying for the actual process of enjoying yourself. We don't have that money to do those things. And it's, I, I try not to get angry about it, because it's, as in, this is just my life. And me and my husband are very much in the place where we're just grateful for the time that we do get, and the time that we make as special as we can. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we can go stay in a 5-star hotel on Friday night every week, but we we appreciate what we have. And I do think that that's something that I've learned, that the less you have, the more you appreciate what it is, be it finance, be it spare time, be it relationships, whatever caregiving has cost you, whatever you retain, you are very grateful for, and hope that you don't lose any more.
If you could go, I don't know, this question, it's hard because it's like if you went back to the beginning, it's like you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know what to ask or where to find this. But like looking at it now, is there anything you could have done differently at the beginning to have found these resources? And maybe this question's hard because it's like
Well,
you were so different then.
to find the resources, I think it's easier. I think that I should have been more vocal. I've learned with the social system, the louder you are, the more help you get. And but all of our family, especially when we started the process, we were so scared that we would be seen as like a non-loving family because we needed help. And it's not that we didn't want to do it. Sometimes it was too physically demanding, or, it wasn't practical, or emotionally, people didn't want to do certain things. And there was so much caregiver guilt and family guilt of that. So I think going back and just saying, like, it's okay to ask for help and it's okay to demand it. Me and my mum, there are stages where we feel like we're working for a care company. Like, I'm supposed to get 4 hours of funded free time off a week to support me as a caregiver so I don't burn out because they know if I burn out, Betty has to go in a care home. But that time is unstructured. So my care company, because they are struggling, the industry's struggling, they give me it when it suits them, not when it suits me or Nan. They change it last minute. I'll look in the morning and I'll go, oh, I've got a care sit today. And then they'll not be here at that time. And I'll look again and then it's tomorrow. And I used to get really angry about it. I'm like, I stopped organizing seeing friends. I made no plans. This was before Babs had declined to the stage that she is, because now I use all of that time to see her anyway. But before, I'd try and meet up with friends and go for a walk for half an hour or grab a coffee with somebody. And I would have to cancel last minute. And it was becoming so frustrating that I got to the point where I actually wrote in a journal that I started a year ago. And I said to myself, when you're at, Nan lives at 64, that's her address. When you live at 64, you don't matter. Let go of what you want because it's more frustrating to try to help yourself. And in the time, it was the right thing for my brain to do. But that was so sad to read like 6 months ago. I'm like, that is not true. And the fact that I got to the point where I felt as though I couldn't ask for more to help me just survive caregiving and just gave in to having nothing. That made me cry when I read that again. And now I'm like, no, I can be flexible, but I need to, and I'm still not great at this. I can be really good at it with my mum. I'll be like, no, tell them that doesn't work for you. Tell them you're not going to do it. Say that's not great for Babs. But in this house, I'm like, yeah, sure. You can do whatever you want with my care sits. I don't mind. But I did ring them like 2 months ago when they gave me a care sit on a weekend when I wasn't in the house. And I'm like, guys, our setup. Mum and dad are here. Like, why are we doing this? And they're like, oh yeah, we just thought we couldn't do it in the week, so we'd give you it the weekend. So you gave it at lunchtime on a Sunday when I wasn't here. You didn't tell mum and dad they're in the middle of eating with Betty and somebody turns up and goes, leave the house for an hour. No, that's not going to really work for us. So I put my foot down a little bit. So they're a little bit better at not, once it's on the rotor, not changing it. But I've learned as soon as you start saying, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it, you slip into this, they won't mind. We'll take it from their time or we'll take it from their rota. They'll just cover it. They're a loving family. They'll never say no. And we are a loving family and we will never say no. But you need to realize that you're starting to take advantage of our kindness and you break yours. And I said this to the company. I said, you get 2 households because we can survive looking after my nans. You have 2 contracts. You break us because you don't support us in the way we need it. Guess what? We have no option then. You lose 2 contracts. You want to put it down to money, you lose 2 contracts and they'll be going into a care home. Because if I break, the system breaks. And they're like, okay, yeah, we understand. As soon as you try and take money off them, the service just gets so much better. It's very frustrating.
Isn't that true? Yeah, across the board. I think, yeah, you said something about like asking for help and there being like a level of pride in asking for help. And I think that's common is like, everyone says, ask for help. We need to reach out and ask for help. But then there's also this feeling like, I don't want to be embarrassed or it's shameful or, any other reason. But I think what you've just said is really important. Like stand up for yourself and ask for what you need because no one else is going to.
And a lot of people like, especially with an illness around dementia, you hear it and people just disappear. They don't know what to do, so therefore they don't do anything. And that's why I'm so open about my journey. I protect the nans and I share parts of what they do and who they are so people can see relevance. But it's now mostly about my journey. And the more I am sharing about me, the more people are reaching out and saying, I'm in the same situation. Like just the other night, I got a break and me and my husband went for it to the bar and we bumped into somebody that I'd not seen for ages. And my whole break was just her telling me about her mother-in-law having Alzheimer's and us having that conversation. And my husband was like, that's not really a break, is it? And I said, no, but this is why I do it because people won't talk to anybody about caregiving or this illness because they are embarrassed and they don't know what to do. People think by saying they can't do this, it's also a bad thing. No, it's not. Caregiving is not for everybody. It's okay to say that. You actually love your loved one just as much by saying, I can't look after you. I'm going to find the right person to do that. And I think that's the biggest barrier when it comes to me, because people think because I am so invested in looking after the nans at home, I will judge them for saying, oh, I've put my mum in a care home. And I'm like, great, well done. You made that decision. You decided that that was the right move for her, for you, for the family. That's okay. And I tell my family that all the time. This is my decision to be here. I can survive this for probably a very long time. Anybody in this setup can't. There's no guilt to that. If we have to make changes, we make changes. We have to realize that once you start down the route of being a family caregiver, it is about family. This affects every single person that is connected to me in my life, be it friends or family. And yeah, okay, I'm not probably going to give up caregiving for a friend, but if the family starts to suffer too much, then you have to take some of that into consideration. And I do all the time. I'm conscious of my sisters and my nieces and my nephews and my parents, and I have relinquished myself of responsibility of protecting them and trying to fix things for them because that was crippling. But I understand their situations and I support their opinions and their decisions on what we're doing. So it's it's a tough old journey. And, like you said, people don't like to talk about money, but people say money doesn't buy happiness, but it definitely makes it easier if you have it. You can be miserable with money, but money can definitely help stabilize your life so that you can enjoy things. There's so many things I want to do with Betty, but I just can't afford the supplies. I can't, today she told me she wanted a piano. She wants a piano. I've managed to get somebody to donate me a keyboard. That's amazing. That's awesome. And it was like one of those moments where I'm like, okay, I can't afford to buy a keyboard. But I can put it on Facebook and I can ask my local friends, has anybody got, everyone's always got like a random keyboard in the cupboard that they had from school. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but Nan said, she told me this story from her childhood. And I'm like, I'm going to make this happen. And somebody very kindly is like, do you know what? We actually do have one and I'll bring it around tomorrow and we don't need any money for it. And I'm like, you know, it's not begging. It's not it's not doing it's just saying, if you have something that you don't use, I think it would cheer my nan up. And we might get 5 minutes of joy out of it and then we don't use it and I'll pass it back or I'll send it to somebody else that'll use it. But if she gets 5 minutes out of joy, just her face when I told her, she actually remembered the conversation from the morning. And I said to her, guess what's coming tomorrow? And she went, what? I went, a piano. And she's like, what? And I'm like, okay, well, it's a keyboard, but it's as big as a piano and you can put it on your table. And she was like, oh, well, can we put it in the window? And I'm like, you can put it wherever you want. Yeah. So finding ways, you have to be 50, you have to find ways to get things to sometimes make things more interesting. Not all of joy is free. There are definitely things you can do at home to create. We played for 25 minutes yesterday with a balloon and she's laughed the most she laughed in like a month. But some things you just wish you had that little bit more finance to be able to just do simple things. For me, because I don't drive and we don't have a vehicle that we could get nanny anymore anyway, just going for a coffee that's not in walking distance is £20 in a taxi there and back. And it's like, is it worth the money? The answer is yes, of course it is. But can you afford £40 for a £2 coffee? Probably not. You can't really justify it. So it is that frustration. So it is about finding the charities, the support groups, the things that can help you do things. And just removing that little bit of pride that says, I can support myself, we can do everything on our own. No, who can ever do anything on their own? You know, you can't as growing up adults, you need your parents' help, you know. So why as a caregiver do we think we just say that we don't need any help? We do. We're still people. We're more limited and restricted than most. It's okay to ask for help and it's okay to take it if it's offered. And that is coming from somebody that is very independent and does struggle to take help from people. I hate it, but it's in Nan's best interest if I do. So I'm like, okay, if I can't do it for myself, I can say yes for her.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And that piano story did just bring me a lot of joy for free. So thanks to the Facebook Marketplace person who donated the piano.
God knows what we're going to be happening tomorrow when it arrives. Why have I got a piano? I don't remember. No. And my joy will just go out the window. But for today, it's given
For
me a lot.
today. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take
Thank you so much for sharing just, so much insight into what's working and what's not working for you guys. To round out our conversation, I'd love to ask, we like to ask everyone at the end of the podcast, what's your number one tip for other caregivers? It's very broad, but if you could boil it all down into one tip.
um, give yourself grace. Things will be hard no matter what stage of the journey you're at from the beginning, middle, and end. This is called a journey for a reason. And giving yourself grace to feel the way you feel and make the mistakes that you make. Just don't beat yourself up and just give yourself that grace to realize that it's just a moment to learn from and tomorrow that you'll not do that again and if you do, it's okay. Grace given to yourself allows you to breathe so much more than if you suffocate yourself with self hatred, self doubt. Grace can be very freeing. And I think it's how I've been able to really start to enjoy caregiving because I don't beat myself up when things aren't perfect. And anybody that knew me before caregiving was a bit of a perfectionist and things had to be done my way. Now I just give myself grace to say that my plan didn't work and that's all right.
Yeah, I love that. I call myself a recovering perfectionist because it feels like it's a, forever learning journey. But if people want to follow along with you and the Crafty Carer online, where can they find you?
So I am on Instagram only as the Crafty Carer. Um, that's where they can find me. It's a welcomed open door to anybody that just might need help or advice or support. And yeah, I genuinely do feel like it's a family for me. So if you're joining me just to for no other reason than just to try and get another follower back, don't bother because it's my community that we support each other. So yeah, happy to take any new family members on at any time.
I love that. Gina, thank you so much for sharing so much of your story and of your, Betty and Bab's stories also. So we'll be sure to tag you everywhere this is posted. And we'll see you online in the family at Crafty Care.
Yeah, thanks, Katie.
Yeah. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.